Welcome to Heroes That Help, conversations with heroes who respond to disastrous storms, floods, and tornadoes that wreak havoc every year in Missouri. I'm Tom Stever for the Missouri Department of Mental Health. The impact of natural disasters goes beyond damage and physical injury. There is mental suffering among those recovering from disaster-related trauma. This compassionate caution from the Missouri Department of Mental Health. Some of the information we discuss in this visual radio series may be distressing or traumatizing for some people. If you need help, we encourage you to reach out to supportive people. There is help available through behavioral health services, including treatment for mental illness and substance use disorders. We're talking today with Terry Cassil with the Missouri State Emergency Management Agency. Terry, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So a few questions about what is it you do?
Well, presently I'm the Deputy Director for the State Emergency Management Agency, and State Emergency Management Agency's role is to be a coordinating agency for all the first responders in the local communities throughout the state. So all disasters start and end locally, and so when those disasters rise to a level where the local resources can't handle those disasters, they reach out to us through a resource request system through WebEOC, and we help out with coordinating, trying to find those resources to go help those communities make it through that disaster, whatever it might be.
So, okay, how and when does SEMA become involved with disaster response?
Well, there are disasters, small disasters and emergencies going on right now and all over Missouri, and many of those we will never know about, and that's because the local communities take care of those things. But when the local community doesn't have enough resources to handle that emergency, let's just say for a tornado or for flooding, then they'll reach out to their region, and maybe the whole region is affected, so the region can't help out with other communities, so they'll reach to the state. And then we bring resources, hopefully from another part of the state that's not affected, to help out with that.
Okay, tell me about the proper chain of command for resulting in SEMA involvement.
So every community has an emergency management director, and those emergency management directors, those local directors, work with the local sheriff's department, police department, fire department, the health department, whomever, all those local departments. And so again, whenever those resources are needed from another area, that emergency management director from local will reach to our regional coordinator that we have. So we have a regional coordinator that is a SEMA employee that lives and works in each region, each of the 9 regions. We are paralleled with the Highway Patrol troops. So they'll reach to that regional coordinator and ask that regional coordinator for help, more resources, more help. And then that regional coordinator reaches to our operations desk, which I'm formally the operations chief at SEMA. So they would reach to the operations desk and ask us for those to help out with those resources. And then we would reach out to our emergency services function people throughout the state, whether it be the Highway Patrol, MoDOT, DNR, the health department, agriculture department, all those local, those state agencies to help out with those resources.
Just briefly, Terry, talk about the resources that SEMA depends on or has access to in the event of a disaster, and to what extent do other government entities become involved, like, for instance, federal agencies, FEMA, for instance. How do they help in that regard?
The resources that are needed depends on the disaster, of course. So we talked about flooding a few minutes ago. So a community might need pumps, or they might need sandbagging machines or sandbags for flooding. They may need generators if there are power outages during electrical storms or during winter storms where we lose power with ice storms. And how FEMA helps us and the other federal agencies, there are many federal agencies that we depend on. And we have a direct conduit with the National Weather Service, and we use the office in St. Louis, also in Kansas City and in Springfield, and we communicate with them daily, many times daily, to get that forecast when those storms are going to hit Missouri, when they're going to pass through, what the effects are going to be, where they think they're going to hit, so that we know where to maybe pre-position assets. We also get liaisons from the National Weather Service, also from the Army Corps of Engineers during flooding, maybe from other state agents. We also bring in a liaison from FEMA. FEMA helps us in a number of ways. Number one, they have resources that they can, physical resources that they can bring in, but they also help us to start the paperwork and the documentation, so that if we make a presidential declaration in a large disaster, they help us with the documentation of that, because it's all a reimbursement process. So the local communities have to go out and rebuild that bridge, or redo the roads, or the culverts, or whatever's been washed out by a flood. They put those in, but they document all the expenses that went into that. And if we make a presidential declaration, they can apply to get federal funding for reimbursement for that. So it's really helpful to have them on the scene to help us from the beginning, to ensure that those local communities start that paperwork process from the beginning and have it correct.
We have to get word out to people about disasters, to warn them when they're going to happen, and to inform them after they have happened. Tell me about messaging. How does that happen in the event of a disaster?
So, your local radio stations and your local TV stations, we always tell people to watch those, especially because 90% of the disasters we have, or maybe more than 90%, are weather related. So you're getting your local weather, whether it be on your radio going to work or coming home, or whether you're in your house. Watch and listen to that, and take heed to those warnings. We really, that's a big thing. For flooding, for instance, like the vast majority of the fatalities that happen with flooding are people in vehicles. And how many times do we have to say turn around and don't drown? But it's when you see those barricades across the road, nothing is that important. Nothing we're doing in our lives is that important that you can't turn around and take a different route, or wait a few hours for the water to go down and make it to your destination safely. And not only do you put yourself in harm's way, but when you call 911, then we're putting first responders in harm's way also. So when you see those barricades, if I had one message today, I'd say just turn around, don't drive through water, just don't do it. And so the other way we do messaging is through our public information officer at SEMA and with DPS. They use Twitter and Facebook and all the social media things to get out messages to folks, not only about the disaster that's coming, but where to go to maybe get information after the disaster, on for the documentation and any sorts of programs that might be available to help them out after a disaster happens.
Yeah. How would you say that messaging overall, how does that keep people safe?
Well, I think you can just reach so many. Our public information officer, Katie, tells us about how many hits or likes she has on a certain thing that was put out a day or so before. And it just always amazes me how many people see something on social media. So we got our news from, the local weather and then the local TV stations every single morning. That's how we got our information. Today, people are getting that information so timely. They don't wait for the 6 o'clock news tonight or the 10 o'clock news tonight to get their news and their weather. They're getting it in the second that it's happening. So it's so real life, and I think that's just so helpful for people's safety.
Let's drill down to this from a mental health point of view. What have you witnessed in terms of mental stress and trauma among people who have experienced a disaster?
Well, I think one of the messages I always try to tell our folks at SEMA and our regional coordinators is, we have to really be compassionate, because when those people are calling us, it's the worst day of their life. The worst thing imaginable just happened to them or is happening to them at the moment. So we really just have to take that into account and work with them, and know that 2 days from now when the water goes down, we're going to go back to our offices and go back to our lives wherever we are. But wherever those folks were, that this thing is going to be with them for months and years, and maybe for the rest of their lives. So just to have that grace and be very compassionate with them, and know that however they come to you, sometimes people are all stressed out and they yell and scream over the phone. It's not personal. Don't take it that way. It's just a very stressful time for them. And I think many times it helps them if they hear a calming voice on the other side of the phone or the radio, or when we go to see them in person.
What about the people who respond to disasters. What do you witness as far as their mental health is concerned, any stress on them?
So, the folks that come to the State Emergency Operations Center and work with us, it's always good to have those exercises and see how people operate on a regular basis and how they act. And I always try to really watch my coworkers on every day. I always say on a sunny and 72-degree day, and how they're reacting, because during a disaster, especially after 2 or 3 days of it, when you've been up for 24 hours, or you're not sleeping in your bed, you're sleeping on a cot in your office, or you're eating at the SEOC and you're not going home, and you're not getting to see your family and your pets and those sorts of things, those people start to react to things differently. They start to change their behavior. And so that's the thing, as a supervisor, we really have to keep our eye on those folks and maybe take them aside and just visit about how the Cardinals played, how bad they played, or how good they played last night, or just something to visit with them that doesn't have anything to do with the disaster, just for a few minutes. Just remove their mind from it. And also tell them, for the folks that are there at SEOC, I always like to tell folks that someone else has this emergency. We're just here with the help. That it's our job to help them with this disaster. So, number one, we can't be stressed out about it as much, because if we're stressed out, and then that'll even add more stress to the locals. So we got to be as calm as we can be during that time to help them out.
Yeah. What about you, Terry? From a personal standpoint, what have you yourself experienced as far as stress and mental stress specifically from responding? And then what mechanism might you use before or after a response?
So for me, I've been in this business a long time. I spent 20 years at the Columbia Fire Department. So dealing with those stressful situations is something I've been doing a long time, but they're normally really short bursts of stress that happen at a car wreck or at a fire or something like that. And I think coming to the State Emergency Management Agency, I had to adjust to longer term disasters. When you're a fireman, you go to a disaster that might last an hour or two, and when you're at SEMA, they may last a few days. And for me, the thing that I think helps me is I've got about a 35-minute drive from the State Emergency Operations Center to my house, and turn some music on and just think about something else, and look at the leaves or the trees, and see the deer in the fields or whatever when you're driving up the river road up 179 helped me a lot, just to kind of distance myself from what was going on with that pandemic just for a few minutes until I got home, and people were going to be concerned when I got there. So I think that helped me. And then just keep a really close eye on our fellow workers. Yeah. And if they start acting differently and not behaving the way they normally behave, it might be a good idea to just say, let's go get in the pickup and let's go for a ride for a few minutes, and just get out of here for a few minutes and talk about something else.
Yeah. So it's about diversions, pleasant diversions.
I think for me it is. I think that helps. Yes.
Yeah. Terry, what have we left out of here that you would like to add to this?
Well, I think, one of the things that I've tried to focus on at work and with other people is, I think this gives us a really good time to just reflect on what's really important in our lives. Some of the things we think are important are really not that important. And also to look around at other folks and just give some grace. When someone's having a bad day, just give them some grace. And because who knows, it may be you tomorrow that's having the bad day, and you're going to want some grace. So just give what you're going to expect when you're having that bad day.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry Cassil with the Missouri State Emergency Management Agency, one of the important heroes that help when disaster strikes. This program is brought to you by the Missouri Department of Mental Health and is made possible through the Disaster Response State Grant. Please, if you need help, we encourage you to reach out to supportive people, whether through Missouri Behavioral Health Services or another mental health professional. Join us again when we'll talk with another of our heroes that help. And remember, recovery is possible. I'm Tom Stever.